Well, it's great to meet you both. I'm
You?
Drew. I'm host of Crate Diggers Radio at Temple University. So it's really great to see you both today. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It really means a lot to me.
It means a lot to us.
So, yeah. So for, just anyone listening who might not know, and, just for you both, Crate Diggers, kind of highlights artists, who I think, my generation should know more about and, who are highly influential, who I just don't feel like get enough time in the spotlight. And, just about kind of like preserving legacies and introducing them to new listeners, which is something I think you guys do an excellent job of in your work with Sweet Now. So I play Sweet a lot on my show, and it's really great to, just kind of get to introduce them to new people. And, I'm a bassist myself, and Steve is one of my favorite bassists of all time. So yeah, it means a lot to me.
That means a lot to him, man. He influenced a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, going through his discography and, through Sweet, it was really interesting, just to kind of see the through lines to a bunch of other genres. Punk, glam metal, anything you can think of. And I was actually at your show in Sellersville, Pennsylvania, last summer, and just got to see a whole variety of different kinds of people in the audience, which was really cool. It was an amazing experience. And one of the things that really stood out to me was how well you guys mixed some of the hits with, the lesser known songs. You played a really awesome version of Done Me Wrong All Right. And I was just stoked by that, just like some people were stoked by Fox on the Run. So my first question for you guys is kind of just how you decide between playing the hits and exposing new audiences to, those B-sides or deeper cuts, versus playing, just kind of what's on Desolation Boulevard.
Yeah, it's been an evolution. We kind of put in the set what works, and as you can see, we mix it up to the point where uh, it's a good combination from playing the heavy stuff, then to all the way. You take people on a journey, and that's the best way
Mhm.
to do it. I mean, when we discovered "No, You Don't," how great that comes off, and what a heavy song that is, and then to be able to feature "Done Me Wrong." uh, to be able to go into all our solos and be able to, that was the perfect song to start doing that. And so you feature different people in our great band. And I think that's how we do it. Yeah, that's pretty much how it is. We shift it around. We always make it exciting. And we like to mix it up and then start adding the new stuff. Like this
Mhm.
week, we'll be playing the whiskey, and we're debuting our song "Sweet Dream"
Oh,
there,
yeah.
playing live.
So it's really cool seeing you guys, bring your own personal musicianship to it. I feel like it just makes it a lot more of an interesting show. So with that also, how do you guys balance honoring the original spirit of the band while bringing your own identity? What does that kind of look like and how do you figure that out? Has that changed as you guys have been a band?
When Steve came out of retirement, and Rich and I were there for that lineup, and there were some evolutions in the lineup along the way until we've gotten to where we're at now, which where we have Ari Common on vocals, who's just unbelievably incredible, you know, and Jimmy Burkhardt on guitar, who is just another wizard. And then we also have a Dave Schultz on keyboards. It's it's the chemistry of the band. But Richie and I were partners with Steve, so we've always been in control in terms of what's the decisions are made. But it's these songs are so great, man.
Mhm.
Everybody just loves these songs. So the chemistry of the band, just we just try to do the songs justice, And when we're picking a song that we're writing or we're deciding to do, it kind of has to fit the excitement and the excitement nature of what Sweet was about and is about still today to
Mhm.
everybody. It's that's kind of it just happens. We like to say it's what is it I say all the time. It's almost like by grace. It just happens. We don't put a lot of thought into it other than that we just want to do the best that we can do for what the brand of Sweet is.
And I feel like, with the new song you mentioned, Sweet Dreams, which came out just recently, that's a really, I think, excellent example of kind of how you've merged that. Part of how you're continuing this legacy is through your new single. And I've been listening to it a lot. It's been on repeat. And it definitely feels like a song that, connects with me and one I feel like it can connect with a lot of people, especially, given where you guys are with the band. So how long have you known about Steve's part of the song, and what made this moment feel right? Feel like the right time to release it?
Go ahead,
Well,
Steve.
we we knew of this song because we had played it live back many years ago, and so we just happened to have some tracks of Steve playing it and
Mhm.
singing on it, and Richie on drums as well. And so we just, it's kind of like it was getting closer to his birthday,
Mhm.
and there was just we were just told that it'd be really great if you could do something to really honor Steve this year. And Richie and I thought, we got this song, and so we re-recorded everything on it and kept everything, um, kind of surrounded the song. Uh, we surrounded Steve with the song, I guess is a good way to put it, and kept his performance, kept his singing, and Richie's drum tracks were just great. And so that was it. We just wanted to make sure you could hear his voice in there, and that's him playing, and dropped it on his birthday,
Yeah.
which
That-
And
probably
the
one
other
day
key
isn't the
thing is
best
that
day to drop a song, but we did.
Steve passed away in 20. So, as we were in the middle of the pandemic at the same time, and we kept it going. We were playing shows at the time, but things got pretty minimal as far as
Mhm.
playing live. So by the time we got out of the pandemic, 24, 25, it's also a connective tissue of what we've done with Steve over, and it establishes us having Steve on this track. Not that we need to be reestablished,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. It connects the dots.
hmm That makes a lot of sense. It's cool how you kind of link the two, in a way, yeah. Because I know for me, during the pre-pandemic era, of Sweet, I was in middle school and there was no way that, I was going to be able to go to that. And so it's cool with this kind of getting to build that bridge for me and kind of getting a look into the past version after, having seen you guys online and seeing you guys in person. That's been really cool. And I think it's also just super powerful, and, meaningful that you get to collaborate with him in a way with this. What kind of did it feel like to build this song with that in mind? And, feeling all that.
It felt wild when first I brought up Steve's voice soloed. I was just really kind of in tears because
Mhm.
there's my brother. It's just like kind of strange,
Yeah.
and listening to his bass and everything, and actually realizing, wow, I play a lot like him. I really picked it up, but it was emotional, I guess. I mean, I think the family really appreciated it. We had a lot of fun doing it, and we really feel like it's a great song.
Yeah.
Just is. And we might want to shout out that it was written by Steve Priest and his writing partner at the time, David Arkenstone.
Hmm.
So we want to give a shout out to David Arkenstone. He's still active, and he was gracious. We contacted him,
Oh,
and
that's
he
wonderful.
loves it. So you know,
Yeah. No, it feels very much truly like a collaboration. I feel like all the parts just kind of really balance each other out. And, you get to see Steve and also you guys as musicians, which I feel like is something that's overlooked in a lot of, like legacy acts, when bands keep going forward. Because I feel like you guys bring so much to the table, just as you all. So kind of going into that and your own journey, just as musicians, you know, what, kind of have you learned and how have you grown from being in this band? And, through playing through Sweet's catalog, night after night, how has playing other people's music kind of influenced how you play your own and how you understand music as a whole?
Sweet is an animal to itself. So if you're playing another band, another whatever, like my background is like with Keith Emerson from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. When I play with Keith or Louis Johnson or any of these major guys or the Scorpions guys or things, you're in another zone. What we were delighted about, and I can almost speak for Stevie, is when we got into the Sweet catalog, it was like, whoa, this is some serious. It's not. There's some. It's just. It's so different than anything else that I've ever played. And you do a song like Teenage Rampage in front of an audience, and it's a simple song, but how it relates to the audience. There's not a lot of technicalities in it, but just to know how that was originally assembled, and then to be able, as an artist, to use that same energy. Somehow it surrounds you as an artist, and I know Stevie can speak for himself. That it's just part of us. It's like another arm growing out of us.
And so, you're looking at these songs so often and, learning new ones. And, sometimes that gets to be monotonous, but sometimes you also, just have moments where you find new things to appreciate in them. So playing songs, night after night, what's the newest thing you've kind of realized about a certain track or a certain, anything that you've just that's kind of made you think a little?
we got to revisit it again when Ari came in on vocals, and so it is something you mentioned that it there is always something to pick up, and even after 20 years of doing these songs, that there's still when I listen to one of the originals to just kind of revisit it again because we do tend to get our own thing with it. We are individuals, so we're going to play from our hearts.
Mhm.
It's just they're timeless pieces of music, and timeless pieces of music just have that ability to be it just melody, beat, and rhythm, and it's just all over it on every track they did. They were they were serious. The Heritage Band was serious. So when we take on new songs, it's really important to Richie and I that the song is going to have we have to dignify what Sweet is as a brand, and we have to stick to it.
Mhm.
It has to meet up, and it's a tough thing to meet up to, in the sense that it's not like it's got to be some wild, complicated, crazy like Richie did Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yeah.
Those things were heavy, and it just has to have the right goods and energy.
And one thing, as a bassist and as a Sweet fan, that really stands out to me in the songs is just how distinctive Steve's playing is in them. It's really forward in the mix. It's very melodically driven. So for you guys, when you were revisiting his parts and, visiting them for the first times, even as fans way back then, what stood out to you about him as a musician?
Yeah, now Steve's playing bass on this, but I will say that having a tight rhythm section, and because I played with so many great bass players in my life prior to meeting Steve Priest, it's about locking in with your
Hmm.
drummer. Okay, and it's the same thing that now Stevie being our keyboard player for many years, switching under the bass, we have that. We lock.
Hmm.
Now with Steve Priest, I didn't even think about it. It was like, okay, here's just another great player, you know? And when he was playing that, he played the meat of the neck. He didn't do fancy stuff. He just played what was necessary now. But because he had in England, a lot of the guys that came up out of that whole scope were you were influenced melodically by classical and a lot of things going on. So you were influenced by the blues, Motown, all those things. But at the same time, there was a sophistication because that's how they grew up. And so when you hear the parts and how he was able to integrate that into the sweet pieces, like on, Love is Like Oxygen. I mean, he comes up with these interesting notes and so forth, but it was just there. And he knew exactly what to play.
Yeah. No, it's really cool, and it like matches what the song needs exactly, from those more complicated things to, one of my favorite ones, is Yesterday's Rain, where he's just playing like the, downbeats to, the guitar's upbeats. It's so deceptively simple, but so effective and just like pushes it so hard. And that's kind of my favorite stuff to visit in this week's catalog is really just being like, man, like these guys, knew what they were doing. And so, when you're playing, what kind of stuff do you like to pull from? What kind of stylistically do you like to incorporate? And who would you guys say your influences are?
Well, now I'm a bass player officially. So, I fortunately, like Richie said, he played with a lot of great bass players. Likewise, I did as a keyboard player, starting very young. I was a 15-year-old with a Hammond, and a piano. So I got the call from guys that were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, when I was just a kid. And they were always way better than, way out there. But then I got with Nick St. Nicholas from Steppenwolf.
Oh,
And
nice.
that guy had some really great grooves. And then I got to play with Randy Meisner from the Eagles for years, and Randy was another bass player that his parts are just forgettable, right? His part, and you know pick any Eagles, and then on to Steve Priest, who is another just monster bass player. So I stood right next to him for nearly 2 decades,
Mhm.
and I already kind of played bass, so it was just like I started doing the sound checks because he didn't want to come down as his health was starting to change, and I just started to kind of get in with the band. So it was a natural evolution. My influences are definitely Randy Meisner and Nick St. Nicholas, but I also, I love Jaco Pastorius. I
Mhm.
love it. Just I don't know. I could go on forever about bass players, but those are people that I literally played with and
Mhm.
on keyboards and
Yeah.
heard what they did live and how they, the body does a lot too. When you listen to a record, you're listening to it. When you're on stage, there's movement to what you're doing too.
Mhm.
And, so I saw the way Steve was doing what he, and that affected it. So, you know, those are my teachers, I guess.
Yeah. And what about you, Richie? What would you say, for you?
My influences came, well, I started off with my brother. He was 5 years older. So I started off in the surf era,
Hmm.
and so I was the little kid playing with my brother who was way more advanced than me as a
Yeah.
musician. I started off beating, pots and pans and this type of thing. And then when they saw my interest, my parents got me my first drum set. So So from there, I went on to just appreciating growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, through that whole thing. I got into jazz. Like when I got involved in high school and I was in the marching band, they put me on bass drum first because I was kind of like a street drummer. I knew how to play Wipeout and, a lot of surf and,
Yeah.
just basically
Mhm.
real basic stuff. But then all of a sudden, I hear the guy on first snare drum and he's like playing Buddy Rich chops and stuff. And he's telling me, so I got fully into jazz and I immersed myself into jazz. So Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa, and then when I heard Deep Purple, and Jethro Tull, Clive Bunker from Jethro Tull, I realized these guys incorporated their jazz chops into their rock stuff, and that's why Mick Tucker and myself same influences, and that's the reason Steve heard it in my playing when we ended up putting this together. He goes, "Okay, I'm coming out of retirement," because it was very similar. We had Mick and myself very similar backgrounds, even though we're totally different animals, but then again, not really. I mean, he was Cozy Powell. You've got Ian Pace.
Mhm.
You have coming right up right up the chain, and then getting into progressive stuff. Carl Palmer, all the way to just the great Motown players. You've got to have this ear open up to it all. Like Vinnie Colaiuta was played with Sting and all that. He's such an incredible jazz player. He's way beyond me as a jazz player, but I can do hang with the best. But when it's time to lay a groove down, you do what's necessary for the song.
Yeah.
And that's what we do as players.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting. That's one of my favorite parts of looking into music is just like, okay, how do things, kind of relate back and kind of interconnect with all the influences. And that's a lot of the stuff I try and do here on my radio show is just trying to connect the dots for people and hopefully, get them influences to create some of their own music. And so, the show is all just about music discovery, obviously, crate digging, record stores. So when you guys listen to music, how has the way, you listen to music changed after spending so many years making it professionally? What do you kind of look for now and how do you enjoy it differently?
Well, it just it comes to you, I guess. My son is a great influence, but he's 33 now, so he's not quite into that listening scene as much as he used to. It was great to have him though. When I was young, my stepfather was a drummer. So and I came up a drummer actually myself too. Maybe that's why I can lock in on drum or, playing bass with drums well. What Richie and I were talking about it earlier. We like anything that's done well. I don't really care about what style of music it is.
Hmm.
I care about that. If it's done well, it's interesting to me that whether it be pop or jazz or there's these strange types of music now that's like video game music
Yeah.
or like sonic music that's just lots of weird melodies and sounds. I think it's really cool because it's coming from somebody that grew up playing video games and this is what
Mhm.
they write music like, right?
Yeah.
So I don't like to close my mind off to any given genre or style. I like to keep my mind open to anything coming in. And if it's great, I love it. And I might take some of that and use it in my own writing. Otherwise, I don't, that's it. I'm done with it.
And with music discovery, it's always, happening. So what songs are you guys liking recently? What's something that you've been listening to recently that kind of
Well,
you guys
I
have
I
followed?
I just listened to a band that Stevie was really aware of. I wasn't really aware of the Struts, and I started listening to some of that with Brian May from Queen. I just heard them play, and I know they were early 2000s and they're still happening. But, I really didn't listen to that much. And of course, Bruno Mars is cool.
Hmm.
And, I like, not a lot. What you hear on the Grammys, I'm not blown away.
Hmm.
I know that the Young Blood is quite a singer, and yeah, I mean Stevie, I think listens to a lot more. I listen to select. I and really, both of us, I know, we're busy about creating our own music.
Hmm.
See, when I was way younger, I was into Hendrix, Cream, the blues, basic blues. Like what with your generation, what I'm seeing is a similar thing. I don't know how far you go back into the blues, but when I was growing up as a kid your age, what I saw was we look back, where did it originate? And
Yeah.
it came from the blues. It came from, Mississippi. And so that same kind of evolution is happening now. A lot of I think they look back into the 70s, 60s, 70s. You know what I mean? It's like there's that new renewed interest in that. That's why we see a lot of young people in our audiences because they're like, wow, this means something. And we're just it's so great to see you at your age so knowledgeable about that and other people that we run across, the youth, getting hip to our style of music because it's important. It preserves it.
So, with the radio, a lot of the people who we work at the radio, listen to the radio, most of us are either music majors in the music school or in the media and communication school. I'm in a major called audio and live entertainment, where it's kind of like music recording and music business, music combined in that. And so with radio and stuff in general, we really just like to tap into just general musicianship and advice. That, people who have been at it longer
Yeah.
than, people in college have been. So what advice would you give young people today about finding music beyond, what's immediately in front of them, on the Grammys or stuff like that.
Well, have an open mind and find your niche. Get schooled to play across all that. Start with your grooves. Listen to shuffles, and most important, keep yourself. Really, your drug is music.
Hmm.
Stay away from drugs because you'll fall into a trap and you think a lot. I know back in my day when I did fall into drugs, it was like, oh, I thought it was going to enhance my creativity in that. Now that I have gotten away from that for many decades, you actually are a lot more creative without having to, enhance yourself with,
Hmm.
chemicals or drugs or any of that. And I think it comes off. So it will shorten your possibilities. I mean, you'll have a better chance about making it as a professional. Okay, is if you learn your craft, you learn recording, you learn all these aspects, you learn what a producer is, you learn what it is to your instrument, what you're conveying as a singer songwriter. Learning to maybe strum a guitar and learning how to write a song and with a simple melody over it and realize what you can do with recording over that. And there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, so to speak.
Hmm.
But that's my advice. Stevie, I'm sure
Yeah.
you've got your your 2 cents there.
It's amazing that music as an industry now is just there's all this available. There wasn't all this available when we were young. You're very lucky that there's a lot of tools that you can get. I mean, it's one thing to go become a music major. Everybody can go do that. I mean, if you have talent and you get accepted to a conservatory or whatever your deal is, that's one thing. But there's classes for mixing. There's classes for Pro Tools. You can go to school for 5 years on just Pro Tools alone, and you have a lot of. I would take advantage of everything you can that seems to fit with what your trip is going to be. If you want to make your own music and you want to be in control of it, then you better learn how to make records, you know?
Hmm.
And you can go to school and learn it instead of like having to spend your whole life trying to figure out how to do it. The
Yeah.
reason the songs were great in the 70s is they had a great talent band. They had a great writer for songs. If the band didn't write songs, which not many did actually, there were writers. There were producers that knew how to make the records. Those producers were in their 50s back then.
Mhm.
Well, they're all dead and gone now. And the record company itself, the AR person, they had this whole machine around it. Today you don't need that machine. Today you can just do your own thing and get it out there. And then of course it's all about your socials, you know. And so pay attention to where you're headed. Look to the future, but stay with where you're at and true to yourself and to your talents and what you love, as far as what the music you love to create, and you're going to just be fine.
So thank you guys just so much. This means, the absolute world to me. It's been really great talking from you guys and, learning from y'all.
Thanks a
Yeah,
lot.
same here.